Hey, we just had an incredible event in baseball night. Raise your hand if you went to baseball night. Yeah, there was 50 of us there. We tailgated, we ate, we went into the baseball game. It was awesome. And then there was this crazy thing where from the second we got there was a thunderstorm right over us. From the first inning, I had leaders pulling out their phones pointing at the radar hey man, it's gonna be really bad. And then this super cool thing happened where the thunderstorm kind of made a U around us, and it didn't rain until the 8th inning. And we were able to watch all the way to the 8th inning, and then we felt, if y'all have been around a huge thunderstorm, the temperature drops 10 degrees and the wind kicks, and you're like, time to go. So we did that, and the rain didn't start until we were in the cars driving home, which was awesome. Thank you, God. He provided, allowed us to have an amazing experience. And it be like that sometimes, right? Don't laugh at me, I'm cool, I'm hip. It be like that sometimes, where God just comes through in the clutch for us. And sometimes it's something small and menial like a baseball game and a little bit of rain. But sometimes it's this big, profound thing where God just comes through when you didn't know, or how you didn't know he was gonna come through. For example, all my high schoolers, raise your hand if you've ever had a boyfriend or girlfriend. Keep your hand up if you've ever broken up with that boyfriend or girlfriend. Right? Now, keep your hand up if when that breakup happened, you thought it was the worst thing in the world. All the hands are still up oh my life, I was gonna marry them, I knew everything at 13. Oh no. All right, now keep your hand up if breaking up with that person was probably the best thing that ever happened to you. Do y'all see my point? Sometimes when you're in the middle of the problem, you're too close to it to understand what it looks like when God sees you through the other side. Well, as I continue this series, Beauties and Beasts, there happens to be a whole book about a circumstance like this. It's called the Book of Ruth. It's one of those smaller books, kind of buried in the Old Testament. And I'm willing to bet that if you haven't done an intentional Bible study or already heard a message on the Book of Ruth, you probably skipped that part. Yeah. So we're going to talk about it today. We're going to talk about the entire book, the whole book. And the reason I say that is because it's only 4 chapters and it's very small, so it's not going to take very long to get through. But the whole book matters. So I'm going to Cliff Notes it where I can, and I'm going to pull direct verses where it matters. And we're going to step through the entire book of Ruth. So we open, scene, curtain lifts, right? And what we have is a man named Elimelech and a woman named Naomi, and they get married. They have 2 sons. And they all live in this place called Moab. These 2 sons each get married. Oprah and Ruth are these 2 wives, okay? And then over the course of a few years, Elimelech dies, and both sons die. So now Naomi has lost her husband, both her sons, and she's left with these 2 daughter-in-laws, and that is it. It's all she has in the whole entire world. Well, Naomi hears about this place called Judah, where God's doing big things, doing huge things. He's providing, he's moving mountains, he's doing all this stuff. And she's like, man, my life is so broken and I am so far away that maybe I need to move closer to God. So she packs up and she's ready to set off for Judah. Both of her daughter-in-laws, Oprah and Ruth, are like, man, we're going with you. You're not getting rid of us. You're all we have, we're all you have, we're a pack. Her daughters want to go, but Naomi stiff arms Ruth and Oprah, says, no, y'all ain't going with me. In fact, the exact verse, it's Ruth 1, verse 13, says, it is more bitter, this is Naomi talking, it is more bitter for me than you because the Lord's hand has turned against me. She believes her life is so bad because something she did caused the Lord to completely turn against her. And she's basically saying, look, you don't want to be a part of this mess. Y'all don't want this. She goes on to say, you're young, you're beautiful, you can wed again. Don't let me be the end of your story because you have a whole nother chapter waiting for you out there. Begrudgingly, Oprah says, okay, Naomi, I love you, but I understand and I'm going to go about my business. And she leaves. Well, Ruth comes in the clutch and is like, no, I'm not. I'm not going anywhere. I'm with you until the day we both die, and that's how this is going to be. And after a little bit of back and forth, Naomi just goes, all right, I guess you're coming with me. You're coming with me all the way to Judah. So they set off. They go to Judah. They have nothing. They have nobody. They have nothing. They can't provide for themselves. Naomi is older in age. So Ruth does what she can. She goes into town and she finds these harvesters who are picking out grain from crops. As lowly as it can get, she falls in behind the harvesters, illegally, without permission, and just picks up the grain out of the dirt that they leave behind. And this is what she plans to use to provide for herself and her mother-in-law, Naomi. Imagine people going through fields, picking wheat, and every small grain that they don't put in their bag, she's digging through the dirt to pick up that grain so that they have something to eat. That is how desperate she is to provide for her mother-in-law and herself. Well, it turns out this land belonged to a man named Boaz. And Boaz, as we find out in this book, was part of the same clan as Elimelech, which was Naomi's original husband. So all these storylines are starting to come together. It's funny how over and over in the Bible we see how God makes these cosmic collisions happen, where people that maybe wouldn't have crossed paths do, and oh, by the way, they share so much life together. So Boaz comes out and sees Ruth picking up these grains, putting them in her pocket. This isn't a big town. And Boaz got to hear about this foreigner, this immigrant, who came to town with her mother-in-law, which is unheard of back then. She didn't owe her anything. They're not blood related. And is now picking through dirt to provide for her. So he grabs Ruth one day and he says, "You're going to stay with my workers, drink when you're thirsty, and work for me. And I have ordered every single person here to never lay a hand on you." So of course, Ruth's like, "Man, Boaz, why are you showing me this favor? What did I do to earn this? I'm a lowly foreigner. I have no ties to you. I don't deserve this." And he says, "I know what you've done for your mother-in-law, even though you've had no reason to do so." And that could preach a whole message all on its own. Because that's one of our nautical markers here at Momentum, which is generosity generates goodness. Ruth was so generous to her mother-in-law that a stranger in town heard about it and felt the need to bless her, simply for how she was acting towards her mother-in-law. Generosity will always generate goodness. Well, Boaz continues to bless her. He allows her to eat and also take a share back home for Naomi so that her mother-in-law is fed. After this, Naomi urges Ruth, "Go to Boaz. Sleep at the foot of his bed." I know this sounds weird. Customs and courtesies were different back then. "Sleep at the foot of his bed and offer yourself to him as a wife." She does. Boaz is taken back by her kindness. This was a huge grand gesture. So he's taken back. But he was a man of such principle that he said, "Look, I know that Elimelech is in my clan, but there's actually one relative who's closer to you than I am, and it's his right to marry you first." So Boaz goes and speaks to this man. And he says, "Look, if I marry Ruth, that's going to mess up my whole estate. It's all you, big dog. Go get her." Right? Picture like 80s movie, dude walks outside, puts his fist in the air, like, "I got the girl." Goes to Ruth, him and Ruth get married. Not too far after, Ruth gets pregnant, and she has a baby boy. This is where we're going to pick back up in the scripture. The news of this birth spreads through the town like wildfire, and the women cheer out. And in Ruth 4, verse 14 to 17, the women said to Naomi, Ruth's mother, "Praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a guardian redeemer. May he become famous throughout Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you and who is better to you than 7 sons, has given birth." Then Naomi took the child in her arms and cared for him. The women living there said, "Naomi has a son," and they named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. There is a ton in the book of Ruth to unpack. A ton. You know, you could talk about the heart of Ruth and how she didn't leave her mother-in-law and always provided. You could talk about Boaz sticking to customs and courtesies and walking the line and doing the right thing. You could talk about how Ruth's steadfastness and generosity spread like wildfire and allowed Boaz to easily give to her. It's a lot of good lessons. But there's 3 takeaways I really want to talk about this story. Like, if you're kind of tuned out or staring at your phone, like, right now, listen. Pull out your paper, your pen, your phone, whatever you take notes on, and listen to this part, because it matters. Number 1, the principle that God often works through those who have endured tragic situations to change the lives of others. I can't tell you how many small groups I've had the honor of sitting in, and I get asked every time, almost every time, why does God do bad things to good people? Yikes. Tough pill to swallow for me, especially when it's the first question y'all ask me. And the truth is, sin entered the world a long time ago. It's a fallen world that's spiraling all the way to Revelation, but God takes what the enemy meant for evil and turns it for good. God works through those who have endured tragic situations to change the lives of others. Because of Naomi's strife, because of what she went through, she lost everything, her husband, her sons, everything. But because she decided to stay faithful and seek God, because of that, Ruth found a husband, Boaz found a wife, and Naomi had a whole family once again, including a little baby boy named Obed. Number 2, God will work through the most unlikely means. Ruth was a poor widow and a foreigner, an immigrant. Yet God used her as a piece of the most important story you and I will ever get to hear about. I'm going to go back because I don't know if y'all caught it. So I'm going to retread a little bit. Back to verse 17 where it says, the women living there said, Naomi has a son, and they named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. And maybe you're sitting there and your lineage knowledge isn't, quite there where you're like, oh my God. Because when I read this for the first time, my reaction was, oh my God. Because, and literal, like, oh my God. It's going to make sense in a second. Because Ruth and Boaz had Obed. Obed had Jesse. Jesse had David. Yes, that David, King David. The man who God said was a man after his own heart, David. David who took out Goliath, David. David who was supposed to get killed by the reigning king but was spared so that he could take the throne, David. David who was in the lineage and led to the birth of Jesus Christ, David. That David. God took what no one saw as good at the time and turned it into something immaculate. And number 3, God is sovereign. God is sovereign, and you can see sovereignty dripping from the story from front to back. He is in control of everything that happens, whether we understand it or not. All of us are here on ground level, looking straight ahead and trying to judge the world we see. God is at 30,000 feet, seeing everything around us, and not only that, but all the time before and after us that ever came and ever is to come. Maybe he knows a little bit better what's best for you than what you see standing at ground level. It is so hard for us to see through our current storm sometimes. I talked about that relationship. Who here's been broken up with? And half of y'all raised a hand. Who thought it was the worst thing in the world? Y'all kept your hands up. It's so hard for us in the storm to understand what's beyond it, because we can't see. But God will continually take what the enemy meant for evil and turn it for something good. It might take days, months, years. It might not even be something that you get to see in your lifetime. And that's tough. That's a hard pill to swallow. But we may never know what the outcome of the actions of our lifetime prosper on the back end. Much like Naomi, who was widowed, had a daughter-in-law who lost everything, who was living in her personal hell. She felt like God had turned his back on her entirely. But little did she know that if it weren't for her being widowed, her losing her sons, having to relocate, then Ruth wouldn't have had Boaz. Ruth wouldn't have met Boaz. Boaz wouldn't have had Obed. Obed wouldn't have had Jesse. Jesse wouldn't have had David. And Jesus Christ wouldn't have been born. If Naomi had it her way in the moment. God is sovereign. He has all these puzzle pieces and he knows exactly where they fit and where they go. And far be it for us to try to understand that sometimes when we're broken and we are beaten and we're down on our knees and the only thing we have hold on to is God's promise and his sovereignty, that there's a reason for that season and maybe that we'll never understand it, but we trust and we love him anyway. We don't get to see the big picture like God does. We don't get to know the beginning, middle, and end of our own story. But that doesn't mean we're powerless. We have a choice to make. A choice to keep faith in our God who has done more for us and will love us more than we could ever fathom, to believe that whatever storm comes, he's going to see us through it, and there's going to be something on the back end waiting for us. And to know that he hears our heart, and the great provider is going to do just that. He's going to provide. He's going to provide. Even when the sky is black and the lightning is crashing and the storm is all around you, if you can keep faith in God and know that there's a purpose there, just like Naomi did, your story will not end in that storm because God has plans to prosper you. Do I think Naomi wanted her husband back after he passed away? Absolutely. Do I think she wanted her sons back after they passed away? Who wouldn't? But if I were to get Ruth and Naomi in a room right now and play back the last 5,000 years for them, and they got to see that the little bit of strife they went through that came the back end and God fulfilled turned into every single person in this room getting to have salvation through Jesus Christ, do you think Naomi or Ruth would even second guess what God's plan was for their life? But we don't get to get that replay. So in the moment, we have to keep faith that God's plan is the plan, that he is sovereign. Honestly, this book's an even greater testament to the resolve of Naomi than it is to Ruth. So many times we see it. A loved one passes. Let alone 3, like she endured. But a loved one passes. And it gives somebody every reason they need to stiff-arm God and turn away forever. But instead, she used it as a reason to draw closer. She saw her life in turmoil, and she obeyed a nudge to get up, pack up, and move to a land where God was moving. The problem wasn't God. She knew the problem was here. And this is what needed to be fixed. So she got up and she sought God. And upon arrival, look what happened. He didn't just provide. He didn't just love. He gave her a family. And he provided a way for Jesus Christ to be born. I know what it's like to lose faith in a valley. I think a lot of us do, especially your leaders. Faith is not linear. It's peaks and valleys. And when you're in a valley, it is so easy to lose faith. I know what it's like to feel like the Lord has completely forgotten me. We have those moments. Naomi had that moment when she thought God had turned his back on her. But she didn't let that be her excuse. She turned it into her why. She took what could have been an excuse to walk away from God forever and turned it into a why, a reason to move closer to God, to seek him further, not to run from him. She kept her resolve and continued to move forward the way that God was calling her to a place where she heard God was moving and doing miraculous things and thought, if them, why not me? Because he is the God of all that is possible. She didn't sit on the couch and watch the replay of the last few years of her life over and over and sit in pity and wallow in her own sorrow. She got off the bench and got in the game and worked for the future that God saw her in. Look at what our God can do. Because our God is the same God that was in Naomi and Ruth's life. God does not change. It's the same God yesterday, today, and tomorrow. But there is something that we have that even she didn't. We get the grace and the love of Jesus that while we were imperfect, we were forgiven anyway. I'm going to say that again because that should have landed a lot harder. Yeah. We get Jesus, whose love and grace makes it okay for us to be imperfect, but to be forgiven anyway. I say this every time, and I mean it. I never want y'all to walk out of this gathering without understanding what it means to have Jesus give eternal grace to us. When the world fell, when sin entered the world, there became an eternal separation between us and God. And the wage of sin is death. Not a worldly death, a true spiritual death, an eternal separation from God that loves you so much. So God made a way. He made a bridge. He sent down his only son, 100% God, 100% man, and had him walk this earth for 33 years, to provide an eternal sacrifice that will forever wash us clean, although we don't deserve it and we cannot earn it. Because of God's sacrifice, his only son, we get to live our life knowing that although we are broken and we will mess up again and again, our relationship with God is whole. So right now, everybody in this room, we're going to pray together a sinner's prayer. Nobody prays alone. Because I want to open your eyes, if they haven't been opened yet, to the opportunity to live a life with a relationship with Jesus, with your Creator, with your Lord, who died for your sins and your salvation. So everyone, bow your heads, close your eyes, and repeat after me. Dear God, I know that I'm a sinner, and there's nothing I can do to save myself. I know that without you, there's no way for me to get to heaven. I believe that you died for my sins and my salvation. I believe that Christ was resurrected and rose to heaven. As best as I can, I now transfer my trust to you. I know I'm a sinner and I need a Savior. I give you my life. I receive your life. Now teach me how to live. With head still bowed and eyes still closed, if you prayed that for the first time, if you truly meant it in your heart and confessed with your lips that Jesus is Lord, then truly I say to you on this day, you will be saved. So I'm going to count to 3. And if this was the first time you said it and you meant it and you want to take that first step to put your name in the Lamb's Book of Life, which can never be erased, all I need you to do is tilt your head up and make eye contact with me so that I can connect with you later. I don't want to embarrass you. I don't want to point you out. Nobody else needs to know, but I want to see those eyes so I can connect with you. 1, 2, 3. All right, heads up, eyes open. Thank you, sir. Thank you.